Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making spring-loaded fridge magnets. Well, what on earth is a spring-loaded fridge magnet? Essentially what this is a way for your fridge magnet to hold multiple pages without having to actually remove the fridge magnet from the fridge. I know it sounds a little weird, it sounds a little hokey, and of course it's a little gimmicky, but it's a fun little project and it's a great way to use up scrap. So let's head over to the bench and see what I've got in mind. Well, the project starts off with a cheap set of springs. It's just a multi-pack of various springs. You want to choose a spring that has a tight form or tight coils to it, something like one of these. And I've chosen this one here. It doesn't take much pressure to pull it apart, but yet it still coils back nice and tight and all the coils are perfectly together. That's what you're looking for. So I'm going to be making a couple of magnets, so I'll get a couple of this type of spring, and then you need to come up with your design. Well, my wife loves turtles, so I've gone on the internet and I have downloaded a turtle line drawing. You can make it whatever you want, it really doesn't matter. But what I want to do with this turtle drawing, I've printed 2 copies of it. I'm going to attach it to some scrap 1/4 inch thick MDF or hardboard, and I'm going to cut out 2 of them. One will just be the outer shape of the body, and the other one will be just the outer perimeter of the shell, and they will become our marking templates. Well, I realized that in this particular instance, I could have just used the exact same pattern to make my templates, just that one would be interior and one would be exterior. Not a big deal. So what we're going to do, guys, is I have some 1/4 inch thick walnut here, and I'm going to place the body of the turtle down on this walnut. We're going to trace it out. I'm going to be making 2 magnets here, so I'm going to be tracing it out twice. We'll take this over to the scroll saw and we'll cut it out. And that is the bodies cut. So we can put those aside, and we now need to do something for the shells. So you'll want to pick some kind of interesting wood if you have access to it. For me, I have a couple of scraps of this flame box elder. It's roughly 1/4 inch thick. And I'm just going to lay out my little template here for the shells. We're going to mark it, and just like we did with the bodies, we're going to cut these out at the scroll saw. Well, now we can give the backs of our shells a little bit of a sanding, and as well we'll give the backs of our turtles a little bit of a sanding as well. Now here comes a bit of the fun part, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my power carver and I'm going to shape this a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy on the shaping, and try to leave the center section where the shell goes intact. Try to keep that original. As well, we're also going to try to shape the shell, keeping the back flat, and just kind of round the shell over a little bit to make it look more like a turtle. And then once we get that done, we can move on to the next step. But guys, please, if you're going to be doing this, don't forget the dust mask. Well, I've done the shaping on the body. I don't want much shaping. I don't want a lot of it. It still needs a little bit of hand sanding, but we'll get that after. And I have done the shaping on our flame box elder shell. And what I've done is just with a pencil, I've just roughly sketched out this shell design that we have here. And I'm going to get my wood burner out with a skew chisel tip on it, and we're going to very carefully burn out this shell pattern. Okay, and there we go. There is the design on our shell. Now guys, at this point, we want to deal with our spring. Now this spring here is very specific and has these outside rings, which are going to interfere with what I want to do. So I'm going to very carefully get in there with a pair of side cutters, and I'm going to snip that ring off. Well, it's time to mark the position of our spring. So I'm just going to place it here somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to get it as close to the middle as you can. And I'm just going to place a couple marks here to help me identify where it goes. I'll just trace around the spring. That's probably easiest. And now right in the middle of this circle, right here, I am going to center punch that, and I'm going to drill a 1/16 diameter hole. And now what I want to do is I want to line up our shell where we want it on our sea turtle. We're going to hold that very firmly in place. And then through that 1/16 hole, we're going to place this little tiny nail. I don't know if you can see that. My fingers are probably getting in the way. Little tiny nail. We're going to make sure that this is still lined up, and then just give it a push into the back of, there we go, right into the back of our shell. And what that's going to accomplish is it's going to mark the center point of the hole that we need to drill for our spring, so that when we put everything together, they're going to line up. So now it's time to drill our holes. So what I have is I've measured this spring, and the closest hole that I can get to this spring is a 3/8 diameter. So I'm going to drill, not all the way through, but you know, a good 2/3 of the way in with a Forstner bit. We're going to drill a 3/8 diameter hole just in the body of the turtle for now. Okay, and as you can see, our spring is going to sit right in there. And now we need to mark, this spring is too long. I mean, we could mount the shell, but that kind of looks silly to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the shell down here. I'm going to look at it from the side and see where a good spot is to cut this spring to length. And we are going to drill using this little pin pilot hole, a 3/8 hole in the underside of our shell. So if we mark this spring to be cut right at the top line there, it should leave a small gap in between, which is what we want. By the time we mount it, there should be maybe anywhere from a 1/16 to an 1/8 gap there. So let me mark and cut this spring, and then we'll get that 3/8 diameter hole drilled. Do not make it a through hole. It'll be horrible. So let's get that done and cut and drilled. And we can see that after drilling that recess, if I sit it here on the spring, it's still a little high for my liking, above the base. So that's okay. We're going to trim it just a little bit. We can just get our side cutters in there and take another section off of it, and hopefully that will be right. If not, trim it again. If you trim it too much, get another spring. But cut it until you're happy with the fit. All right, I'm a little happier with that. I've got about an 1/8 of an inch gap here, maybe a touch more, but that should be perfect. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to apply some shellac to this turtle and to its shell. We're going to do a little bit of a finish on them with the shellac. And then when we get that done, we're going to need some 2-part 5-minute epoxy. Well, you want to mix up a small batch of this 2-part epoxy. Now guys, you don't need much. This here that I've mixed is probably way more than I need, but the bottle kind of got away on me. What am I supposed to say? But either way, we're going to mix this up. And what you want to do, I have here some 1/2 inch diameter by 1/8 inch thick rare earth magnets. These magnets are a 9-pound magnet, guys. So they're going to be have plenty of strength to be able to hold your stuff to your fridge. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to take this epoxy, and we're just going to take a little bit of it. We're going to dab it on the back of our turtle there, just like that. And we are going to set our magnet on there. just like that. And we're getting a little bit of squeeze out, but that's okay. I don't mind. That'll help hold it in there. And now, guys, we're going to turn this over, and we're going to take some of this epoxy, and very carefully, we're going to put it in that hole that we drilled, that 3/8 diameter hole. You'll want to try to fill it so that it's almost up to the top of that hole, right up to the ridge of it. That's actually pretty good right there. And then you'll take your spring and you're going to sink it. Hopefully neater than what I just did. But you're going to sink it right into that epoxy. And then you'll let it fully cure. Well, the spring and the magnet are dried on the turtle. And I'm just mixing up another small batch of epoxy. Now, guys, you may be thinking, why didn't I glue all this together in one shot? And the problem is that if you do that, your epoxy can run together and make it so that the spring no longer works on your magnet. And the spring is the whole point of this thing, so you really don't want to do that. So it's now time to glue our shell in place. I'm just going to finish mixing this. Okay, I'm going to use a 3/32 diameter dowel. The diameter doesn't matter as long as it's small, and this will give us a little more precision to get some epoxy into this recess that we drilled here. Now, guys, don't try to have this shell facing up for too long, because that epoxy is going to run down in the spring. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully plant this here in our epoxy. We're going to turn it quickly, adjust our shell, and then turn it back. And now we can sit him there on his back and let that completely dry. So guys, how do these magnets work? Well, essentially, the spring does all the work. So I have a couple sheets of paper here, and you just take a hold of your shell, you pull it gently to separate the spring, place your papers up in the spring, and let go of the shell. And that's it. They hold the papers in the actual spring, which doesn't take away any of the strength of our magnet. And if you want the paper out, you can easily just take it out and you're good to go. But guys, these things are really cool. And there you have it. Some spring-loaded turtle magnets for your fridge. Guys, this project is a ton of fun. It has so many different aspects. The power carver or a Dremel tool, or by hand if you want. So you've got sanding, you've got scroll saw work, you've got wood burning, you've got mixing epoxy, you've got drilling. It has a little bit of everything, but just a little bit. And the best part about this is it doesn't take hardly any material. These are scraps that you would normally burn. Now, the point of this whole thing, guys, with this magnet is, you know, you get a magnet underneath or on top of papers on your fridge. Let's say 10 papers, just to throw a number out there. As that magnet goes through that 10 papers, it loses its strength. So eventually, the more papers you add, it's going to let go. So the only thing you're limited by here, because the strength of the magnet never changes with the spring-loaded fridge magnet, the only thing that holds the paper is the tension of that spring against the papers. So you're never losing your magnet strength, and that's one of the best things about it. Now, guys, it doesn't have to be a turtle. I did turtles because my wife really loves turtles. It can be anything you want. Heck, it can be a saw blade. Just on a round disc, a saw blade on the front, you pull the saw blade and stick your stuff in the spring. Done. Bob's your uncle. If you need a stronger magnet, put a stronger magnet. If you need a stronger spring, put a stronger spring. But it really doesn't take any material. It doesn't take any stock. I had a value pack, a multi-pack of springs. I used 2 springs and a little tiny bit of wood. That's it. Now the finish, guys, that I put on these things is nothing more than shellac. 3 coats of shellac, give it a little shining up in between with some steel wool. And then at the end of it all, after the 3rd coat of shellac, I just gave it a coat of wax to give it a little bit of a sheen. That's it. It's nothing special. Now you can go all the way and use varnish or whatever you want as the finish if you want to do that, or you can leave them bare, whatever your little heart desires. But it doesn't matter what shape you make, it doesn't matter what you finish them with. What matters is, guys, that you give this project a try. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I've had this one on the list for quite some time to do, and I just wasn't sure how it was all going to come together. And then the turtle idea with the pullable shell hit me, and that was it. We're off to the races. Guys, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you're not going to miss the future notifications of the program. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the project. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I hope you're going to give this a try for yourself. But more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.